Welcome to the Fantasy Football Hot Stove with your hosts, Scott Simpson and Jamie Calandro, with special guest Field Yates. Welcome, everybody. I am Scott Simpson. So excited to have you here tonight. We are back. The Fantasy Football Hot Stove is returning. We're so excited. My man, Jamie Calandro, is joining me from the Fantasy Team Advice. I am now a member of the Fantasy Team Advice today. Jamie, welcome. So excited to have you on as my new partner, brother.
Absolutely, Scott. I'm so excited to be doing this with you, to revitalizing the FF Hot Stove podcast and be part of the Fan Team Advice. I'm Jamie Calandro, JAC3600, and I am ready to talk some football with our special guest today.
Oh, man, and we have one of the best in the business. I say the best in the business. Mr. Field Yates himself. You might know him from such things as ESPN, if anyone's heard of that. It's a small little up and coming out of Connecticut, but they'll be around, I think, for a little while. Fantasy football focused podcast, FF Now, NFL breaking news. He's all over the place. Welcome, Field Yates. So excited you could join us tonight.
First of all, it's an honor. Now, I must take you to task on something, though, because we don't want to be the kind of people that are engaging in false advertising. Call me the best. A little bit of a stretch in my estimation. There are so many bright fantasy minds, but I'm humbled to be with you gentlemen here tonight. This will be a lot of fun, and there's nothing better than talking football. And the fact that we can do it amongst great company, that right there is the icing on the cake.
Oh, I love it. And talking football is something that you do and I do and Jamie does all year round. It never goes away. And that's the heart of the hot stove is kind of the idea, taken from baseball, where some of the most exciting parts of it are during the off season. Football really has a better hot stove than baseball, from free agency to the draft buildup to kind of now settling in. I'm super excited. We are all super excited. Jamie, let me ask you a question real quick. When did you realize that you fell in love with football and this was something that you were going to do no matter what the season was?
Yeah, I found out even before I got out of high school that football was a 12-month thing. And that's the best thing ever. I grew up a big Giants fan, and I started watching games with my dad, as I could walk. And when I saw Scott Norwood miss that kick in 1990, sorry, all the Bills fans listening here, but that made me fall in love with the team. And from that point on, it was box scores. And as soon as I could play fantasy, I started doing that. And then everything took off, and I've enjoyed every second of it since.
No, I love it. And we're going to get into Fields' origin story a little bit too. I found out something today from one of my family members that there's like a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon between Field over at the Kansas City Chiefs when you worked there. And so I'm excited to touch base on that. So what we're going to do, though, here, one of the new things on the hot stove we're going to be bringing out each week is going to be a segment called the hot seat, right? We're here on the hot stove. We want to put someone in the hot seat. So we're going to ask Field 5 questions to kind of get to know him a little bit better. And he's going to share, they're going to kind of get hotter as they go. Now, we're not going to be too, demonstrative in these questions, but they're going to be polarizing, hopefully enough that we get a little bit of a charge out of everybody watching and maybe even the people here who are with us. So Field, to get to know you a little bit, I've done a little research. I grew up with golden retrievers. I love golden retrievers. My parents bred them. I know that you have an amazing golden retriever. Shout out Cisco. Here's my question. First question. Why are golden retrievers the best dogs out of all the dogs?
Yeah, I wasn't aware there were other dogs besides golden retrievers. No, I'm kidding. No, as far as I'm concerned, they're the only dogs. But what I love about golden retrievers, and Cisco is a great example of this, is the loyalty. They are just so insanely loyal to us. And my wife and I can leave the house for 30 seconds and come back, and Cisco will treat it like we just won the Super Bowl together. He's so excited at all times, and maybe he's a little bit too close to us and loyal to us. Like, there's some nights where you wake up and there's a dog sleeping on top of you. It's a little bit uncomfortable in the middle of the night. But I just love the loyalty. I love the fact that, this video is tremendous. One of my favorite moments. Yeah, this is, for those that are watching live, my wife went out to visit her parents. They live in Colorado. And so Cisco went out for 6 weeks with her. I had a great time out there. And so I hadn't seen him for 6 weeks. And, you wonder for the first time being away from your dog, whether he's going to remember you, whether he's gonna maybe think you're a stranger for a second, and instead, quite the opposite happened. Is Cisco and I had an embrace that I'll never forget. So I love golden retrievers. I love all dogs, and Cisco's been the best thing that's happened to us during the COVID pandemic and the quarantine that's ensued since that time.
No, I love this video so much. I just keep watching it, and having growing up with Goldens and having my parents, bred them, and we loved them. We'd have 20 puppies, 2 different females that we grew up with, and so you get in the pen with 20 little puppies, and they attack you. It's very much like this, and to see the love of your dog, it just made me happy. My daughter, we're getting a golden retriever. She's going tomorrow to go pick it out. And we've been trying for a year to get it for her, and it's her Make-A-Wish. And so we're just really super excited, and it's a cool thing that you love golden retrievers too. And I just told my wife and my daughter, I said, I'm going to bring this up. I said, it's such a cool video of Field. It makes me happy. So I wanted to share that, and go like that on Twitter. It only has 20,000 views or something. It should have 1 million views.
I love it. That's addicting. I've just been gazing at it. You may have called on me to say something and glossed right over.
The best part is he's actually scratching at the door right now to come in. He wants to join the party, I think. So maybe we'll let him in a few minutes. The problem is I've got some wires up here for my lighting that he trips those over. And next thing you know, I could be doing this on audio only.
That's not good. Yeah. Is his cone off, or is he still wearing the cone?
Yes, the cone is now off, thankfully, which is good. So I had a little procedure recently, and he's no longer using the cone, which is great. And as you guys know, dogs don't like the cone whatsoever. He was amazing in how he did sort of adapt a little bit, but he's back to being his normal self and his normal, loving, fun, vibrant, young Cisco self.
That's awesome. That's perfect.
Awesome.
I love it. All right, Jamie. All right, we got some more hot seat questions. That first one wasn't too hot, but the next one, we're not going to roast you, but we kind of want to know. Well, Jamie, I'll let you go for it.
Yeah. So we both researched you here, and we found the common factors with some of us. And I see you're a video game fan. 50% of my tweets are sports related. The other half are my 20 minutes of free time at school playing video game music on the piano and having people on Twitter guess it. So I'm interested to know, what's your favorite one out there? You can pick from anybody, old school, new school, any system. What's your favorite one?
Yeah, so I'm a Madden loyalist still, and what's been cool is I've been able to kind of connect with some of the people behind the game over the past few years, which I'll play it on PS4, I'll play it on Xbox. I'm an equal opportunity Madden player. If we're going throwback, old school, I feel Super Monkey Ball is one of those games. I would tell you just Mario Kart, which is definitely a favorite, and Super Smash Brothers is definitely a favorite. But Super Monkey Ball and GameCube, that got me through a lot of summer days back in the day when the weather wasn't working in your favor, or you were at home for a little bit before you could drive. So those are some of the old classics there. But I will forever be a Madden guy. I'm in on the changes that Madden has made over the years. They make some people frustrated from time to time, but I just love ratings day during the summer when players get super upset about their scores in various categories. And I find it all to be very entertaining because these guys are the best of the best in terms of the athletes on the field. But the video gamers, the people that are behind Madden, they've got a job to do. And somebody can't be, not everybody can be a 99 speed at wide receivers. So Madden forever, that's for sure.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to tell you a little inside Madden for me. I bought the game, I don't know, from I'm thinking how old I was when I was 12 or something, or maybe 8 until I was 26 when I got married. My wife, sadly, it's a tale of when I got married, I had to kind of stop playing because I was obsessed. Here's what I would do.
Okay.
I'd buy the game. I'd play every game of the season, and I would play every game as every team. And I would start in the first quarter, and I'd be the home team. And if it was offense, I'd play offense for the whole quarter. If it was defense, and I'd switch controllers back and forth. So I got to play every team, every player, every year of every game. And I'd play all different players on defense. I'd go around and I loved it. I was obsessed. My wife said, listen, we're newly married. You cannot be upset. You cannot play Madden 4 hours a day. And so sadly, I had to kind of lay the Madden down. But that is my all-time favorite. So you know what? Not controversial there in my book, Field. You're crushing it. I love it. Jamie, what's your favorite so far in video game lore?
Well, I mean, first of all, I cannot tell you the amount of money that my roommate in college and I had bet on Super Monkey Ball throughout the 4 years over there, because that's when GameCube was big. The monkey fight and the monkey target practice was everything to us, and we'd stay up till 4 a.m. But yeah, I mean, I'm Madden. I love that it's on the Game Pass now, so you can just play the new one now. So yeah, I'm a big Madden fan too. If I'm feeling old school football, I'll go for the side to side, the Tecmo Super Bowl. Still got a special place there for that. The only problem with that is I'm a traitor, because I like to play as the Eagles, which is like blasphemy to a Giants fan. But I mean, Randall Cunningham, or QB Eagles as he is in the game, can scramble everywhere. So if you get under pressure, you just can't do anything else when it's not a scrambling quarterback.
No, that's great. He's like the first real Michael Vick. I mean, before Michael Vick. I, as a Washington football fan growing up as a kid, I hated when they came to town. I was like, oh, we're never going to be able to get him. He was always just so elusive and kept the play alive for a long time. And then would, I don't know, get to Ernest Bine or somebody. I don't know. Somebody would come out of the backfield and they'd just be terrible for Washington. So, no, I love that. Okay. So now here's what I'm excited about. Pull back the curtain. I'm a home brewer. I caught Winfield that you like craft beer. And so I wanted to get into this. I wanted to kind of, before I asked you, what you had for your last craft beer, I want to ask you, when did you first start liking craft beer? So kind of how did that evolution come about of going into it? Did you start drinking it in high school? Like, I mean, like I drank crap beer in high school and I didn't do good with alcohol. So like, how did you transition to be like, let's drink really good beer instead of, the crap stuff?
Yeah, this was all post-college for me. Like, I thought a nice beer in college was like we buy the 30 of Bud Light as opposed to Natty Light, right? So this is all post-college. And what's so funny is people have asked this question or something close to this question to me before, and I can't recall like my initial indulgences into the craft beer world. I feel like it was a little bit of a slow drip for me. But it's kind of one of those things that, like, once people catch wind of your affinity for craft beer, you kind of become the craft beer guy in your circle of friends. My beer fridge, or my fridge, I should say, is filled with so much beer at basically all times. Like, I can't go anywhere. Like, there's almost pressure on you to drink the right beer or go somewhere when if you're out for dinner and people ask you, like, what to drink, there's pressure there. Like, my father-in-law will constantly be like, any thoughts here? And not because he doesn't have his own taste in beer, but because he just feels like he's deferring to an expert. So I end up being the person that people rely on. Like, so you said that was the last good craft beer I had, or last craft beer. I had said a Stegosaurus double IPA. I'm not sure if that one's familiar to you. And then in my hand right now, I've got one of my favorite breweries, which I don't want to, if that's one of the follow-up questions, I'll leave it be. But in my hand right now, I have got a Soaker, which is from Holmes Brewery in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm going to crack it open right now. It's a Pilsner, nice light. I've had it once before, very drinkable. Got a nice sort of crispy flavor to it. I'm in on Soaker. They've got a few different iterations of it. And basically any beer is my favorite beer, but different levels of favorite. But I'm all in. So cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers. I love that. What a great description. So Soaker needs to kind of, maybe cut a deal with you there. And so
good canner. Yeah. Holmes Brewing Company in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Oh, it's a Super Soaker. It's actually a Super Soaker on there. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I love that.
Yeah, pretty cool.
That's really cool. I love your description of it too. What's the ABV on that?
This is, I think it's 5.4 maybe is what this might be one they don't list it on. They do not list it on here. I want to say I have it on Untapped. And no listing here, but I want to say it's something like 5.4 to 6.2, somewhere in that range. It's a Pilsner, so not super boozy or hoppy. It's solid though, really solid.
Oh no, that's perfect. I'm drinking a Happen Chance Wit beer. It's a Belgian style wit ale from a local brewery called the Brookville Beer Farm here in Maryland. I fell in love. My story of beer love was I drank in high school, just bad choices, whatever I get my hands on. I stopped. I didn't drink in college. I turned 21 and then kind of fell back into just liking whatever bad beer. I went to Europe when I was 30 something. I did a Fulbright teacher exchange. And so I went and lived in the UK for a year and I taught in the UK and I lived in someone's house. They lived in my house here back in Maryland and we switched lives basically. My wife and I traveled over Europe. I brought back 60 different beer glasses from across Europe. It was so heavy when we got to the airport. I was like, I'm gonna have to pay so much money. I had all my underwear and socks wrapped in these glasses, and it was like MacGyver. Not one glass broke. And we got them all home safe. My wife was like, I can't believe you did that. I told you not to do that. And I was like, I know. They're all up in my cabinet. Now I have over 100 different glasses. So that's when I kind of realized, and I got out of my American perspective, and I kind of just saw the rest of the world. And it was very helpful to realize, oh, there's so many, amazing beer styles. And then I came back 2010, and craft beer had just kind of jumped off. And it was like, hey, Sam Adams has these different types of beer, and hey, there's different types of styles. And one thing I like about America is that you can do whatever you want. And Europe is very much like, if you're German, you're in this style of beer. If you're English ale, you're in this style, and you kind of do it again and again and again. In America, they're just like, we're gonna make whatever we want. So Super Soaker beer, Pilsner, that's incredible. Like that sounds awesome. Yeah. So, I'm gonna check that out. And I failed at shipping Pete Overzet beer. I tried to do it today. You can't ship it unless you have a license to do distributing. So I can't send you this beer. But if I ever drive up to see Pete in Boston, I will stop by and I'll bring you some of this beer as well, as I go on a beer passing out road trip this summer. I have to go see Pete. So
yeah, we'll do a trade. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been up to Maine here. I grew up in New York my whole life. When we moved to Maine 5 years ago, so I don't know if you've ever been up in this area, but Portland, Maine has introduced me to Allagash White, which is become my favorite now of the craft beers. And you know that? Nice.
Yeah, I actually did my bachelor party in Portland, and I love the city of Portland. I think it's the best beer city in the country as far as places I've been. So Allagash is up there. There are so many. Bissell Brothers is an amazing brewery up there. I absolutely love Good Fire Brewing up there. There are tons of great breweries in Portland. It's like an embarrassment of riches. Austin Street. There are so many great beers up in Portland. I think Portland might be the best culinary city that I've ever been to. Between the food and beer, it's ridiculous how much good eats you can get up there.
I didn't even know it until I moved here. It's right. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. High Roller Lobster Company is my favorite. I absolutely love High Roller Lobster Company.
We just visited 2 summers ago, and it was incredible. I mean, every day, where's the new craft beer spot we're going to? Okay, where's the we love the Maine company. That was one of the Maine beer company. Was really
it's really good.
No, that's cool. All right, so we're not. It's not too hot so far. By the way, this is supposed to be the hot seat. And by the way, it is sponsored by. I forgot to drop this at the beginning, so I'm working on my producing here. It's sponsored by Bo's Hot Box Gourmet Small Batch Hot Sauce. Go get it at BigTimeFlavorCode.com. Field, just for coming on the show, we're going to send you a package of all of Flavor Co's stuff. This is one of my best friends. I do another show with him on Friday night called Chock Blocked. It's a DFS style show. And so he developed this sauce. It is one of the best hot sauces I've ever had in my life. He did it last year just for a fantasy football league. So it sprung out of loving a fantasy group of 11 guys in his league. He's like, I'm making a sauce for you. And now he started a company. And I'm all about just, this is my favorite hot sauce. I'm addicted to it. I buy it by the case. So we're going to get a free one of these. And he also has spice rub. And if you're not into spicy stuff, there's other beautiful, amazing culinary package we're handing out from BigTimeFlavorCode.co. So go check it out, everybody. It is awesome.
Yeah, I actually am a hot sauce junkie. So I'm fired up.
There you go.
Oh, this is going to be awesome. So now we're the fire. Jamie's going to hit you with the fire about ESPN. So we don't want to cause any problems over there. We know you're loved by everybody. You're not Matthew Berry trying to. Well, yeah, I mean, what are we thinking, Jamie?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll tell you, when we see people like you that are with us with ESPN or any of these big networks, I always wonder, you talk football to the crowd and everything, but behind the scenes, you got to play leagues with these people. So at ESPN, who would you say is your biggest fantasy rival and why, I guess?
I would think Matthew, because he likes, I don't know if I like to see him lose or see myself win more. Remember the famous Michael Jordan line where it was like, I hate losing more than I love winning? Maybe it wasn't Michael Jordan. I just feel like it was during The Last Dance. I like seeing Matthew lose more than I like winning myself. And it's all spirited and friendly rivalry, but we play in a league. This is a fun league. It's called the War Room. It's 16 teams. A lot of people that you may know in front of the camera, and then a bunch of amazing people behind the camera. Myself, Matthew, Stefania, all in the league. Adam Schefter's in the league. Chris Mortensen's in the league. Louis Riddick and Teddy Bruschi and Mina Kimes. And it's just awesome group of people that are in this league, on top of a ton of producers who are all sort of the lifeblood of ESPN. And it's so competitive, and it's so ridiculously hard to win in that league all the time. And it's fun because it's people you know. There are times where Schefter will pick somebody up, and you'll think to yourself, like, what does he know that I don't know? Like, he'll pick up the Falcons' third-string running back, and you're like, oh, my God. You know, this when Devontae Freeman was still there, is Devontae out this week? And he's just preparing. It's like your mind is constantly spinning. So this is my fifth season coming up in the league this upcoming year. So, and I have not won this championship yet. I would like very much to win the War Room League next year.
Who is the defending champ?
Our boss, Seth Markman, is the defending champion. And Seth started last year. He's the only person who's ever won the league twice. It's been around for, I think, 12 years. And Seth just won, became the first ever repeat winner. He started 0-4 last year. And then I think went 8-1 down the stretch. And then was the highest scoring team in the playoffs by far. Like, it wasn't like he eked out a round one win and a low scoring victory. He just dominated. He had very weak running backs, but he had Davante Adams and Travis Kelce were his first two picks. And those two guys, I think he may have been remember now, Javonte last year coming into the season was not, we were still on the Michael Thomas train and a couple of other wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, you can talk yourself into. He had, I'm pretty sure it was Davante and Travis Kelce, got them at like maybe 12 and 16 team league. What would it be, 12-19 or 12-20, something like that. So those two players basically got him a championship.
That's awesome. I'm sure that he doesn't let anybody know that the boss, the winner, and he just keeps it quiet to himself, like under the vest, like in memos, like, hey, don't forget to say this read, and then I'm the champ.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, I'm paying you guys to give the analysis, and I'm beating you. What the heck?
I'm going to step in front of the camera and do it this week. Thanks, Matthew. Well, speaking of Matthew, and there is a rivalry there, and I think it's a nice thing. And I think, you're is this your ninth year? You started in 2012, so are we going into the ninth season? Is this the 10th season? How does it all work?
I guess this is my 10th season coming up. This is my 10th season coming up. Yeah, at ESPN, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I remember, I started in 2003 in ESPN leagues, and Matthew Berry was just the GOAT. I mean, he still is, but it was just that was there. And I remember when you came in, and my thought was like, oh, look, a young upstart. Back then I was younger too. And I was like, oh, this is great. And you've held your own. I mean, and if not excelled, you've done incredible. And so here's what I want to know: kind of what makes you, in your mind, because none of us wake up and go, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not going to make it. We all wake up and go, I can do this. And so kind of when you get with Matthew and you're competing with him, like what kind of gives you the edge against him as you have kind of competed against him? What as you've sharpened your sword, where are you standing against him in this situation?
I think the one thing is probably if I had to sort of counsel a young, right out of college, want to be fantasy analyst, and they ask me like, what are some of the keys to success? Or how can I become the next Matthew Berry? I'd say by not trying to be the next Matthew Berry, because he's one of a kind, right? I mean, he's the GOAT, he's the godfather. As far as I'm concerned, he's the face of fantasy sports in general. People don't think of fantasy sports and not also think of Matthew Berry. So rather than trying to replicate him by being him, that's chasing a ghost, right? I mean, he's one of one. So what I've always felt like has helped us is that he's got his strengths, which are abundant and, too many to list. I've got the areas that I feel most comfortable in, and I try to chip in with those areas while also giving Matthew his space and allowing him to do what, he does best. And there are times, one thing I've also realized is when you have a multi-person, podcast or show is that, debate and disagreement can be useful in fantasy football because sometimes it helps people if you're trying to make a decision between two players. Like I'm trying to whatever. It might be useful to hear two cases and side with the stronger one. But if you don't disagree with somebody, I would much rather hear, hey, I agree with that, good point, or I see it the same way and here's why. And so when I it's picking battles with Matthew. If him and I see something very differently, then I have the license, as he does as well, to combat him. But if we see it the same way, then I'm not going to try. I'm not going to, hey, you know something, man? Like, I'm actually fading Patrick Mahomes this year. No, of course I'm not fading Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Like, I love the guy. So I think that's what's helped us is that we've kind of developed this, we call it sometimes father and son-like dynamic and relationship where while it may look, like we're kind of going at each other, it's for the most part very kind-spirited and just for fun.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I have a relationship like that. Not the exact same thing. It's more, I hired Bo McBigtime. He's the creator of the Hot Box sauce. And
Sure.
he's my writer for DFS. And then he takes my money every week in DFS. So I pay him to write for me, and then I pay him to beat me head. And so, it's a tricky game you're playing when you're, rising up a Field Yates. Matthew has created, his own persona, but then I love what you kind of said. The heart of it is be yourself, be Field, so I think that's a great way to launch into, the next kind of section, which is kind of how you made yourself into a fantasy football analyst.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it was by mistake. Oh, go ahead, Jamie. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, I was agreeing with him. I was saying I'm looking forward to hearing these stories. This is the best part, as an up and coming fantasy analyst, just to hear these stories. So go ahead.
So mine was all by accident. So I was working in scouting with the Kansas City Chiefs. We have our 6th degree of Kevin Bacon conversation at some point here in the next couple of minutes. And I left the football world, and I did not know what I wanted to do, but I ended up getting back to Massachusetts. I started to write a blog, and that led me to eventually ESPN Boston, where a great man named Mike Reese, who covers the Patriots for ESPN, I sent him an email amongst about 1,000 other emails, and Mike was the only person that responded to me. And he asked me if I could help him out with a couple of projects, and I did. ESPN realized that they did not necessarily need me to do the same thing as Mike because Mike was so good at his job, but they asked me to do some other things. Hey, could you write, tap into your scouting skills? And not that fantasy wasn't big 10 years ago or 8 years ago, but as you guys know, the rise remains meteoric, right? It's growing more and more and more, and it's grown a lot over the past 8 years. And so what happened was ESPN asked me whether I'd be interested in doing some fantasy analysis. And I said, sure. And they said, we don't care whether you've had a long background in fantasy or not. For those that aren't watching, I'm using my hands here, but fantasy and football, they may not be the exact same track, but they're close to parallel. If you guys, we were talking about him earlier, like when Schefter breaks a big story during the offseason and free agency, like, hey, Kenny Galladay is going to the Giants. I'm just telling you, there are way more people interested in that for fantasy purposes than there would be if we didn't have fantasy. Like, I'm not saying it's the only thing that matters by any stretch, but a lot of the conversation when you're at the water cooler at the office, if we were able to go to the office right now, is, I don't know, man. Like, I'm a little nervous about Kenny G. He goes from Matt Stafford to Daniel Jones. Are there more targets? Are there less targets? So fantasy has become such a huge part of our football discourse that I kind of got on the train when it was, not that far, away from the tracks. And I feel very fortunate. Life is often about timing and opportunity. And I feel like timing and opportunity were on my side with the fantasy industry. And I started doing the Fantasy Focus. I believe this was my 7th season coming up. It's been an amazing run. We're so lucky to have the crew that we do. And, I don't know what the future holds. I mean, I know we all feel that way. But when people ask me, like, what I want to do for the next, in 5 years or 10 years, like, I want to be involved with fantasy. That much is for sure, because I don't think the passion is going to wane at all from the masses. Everybody loves fantasy.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And one thing that you touched on before is kind of where you were. You came back, and here's our 6 degrees of separation. Emily Claver, I think the person who hired you,
yes,
over in Kansas City. Her daughter, Beth, is married to one of my friends and somebody who's married to one of my sister's husbands. So I sent out this today. I said, hey, family, pray for me. I sent a little text to all my brothers and sisters. I have 5 brothers and sisters and a couple of husbands in there and wives, in there. And so I tweeted out and said, hey, pray for me. I got Field Yates today. I'm just so excited. It's awesome. And then my friend, my brother-in-law, Nate, just said, hey, my brother's wife, kind of share this with him. And I was like, that's incredible. It's such a cool way that, really, it's a small world in reality.
Yeah, it is.
We kind of think it's a big world, but we're all parts in this. And so, yeah, you worked for Kansas City first, and then you went and worked for the Patriots a little bit. So that was your background before, but you weren't doing, what were you doing you were a scout in Kansas City, correct?
Yeah, so scouting, and by the way, Emily is an incredibly special and amazing woman. She's a wonderful mother, and I'm sure that her daughter is very, very happy, and I'm glad that we made this connection here. So yeah, I was working in the scouting world, and I was kind of cutting my teeth and sort of on that track to, try to become, a scout or a coach. And I don't know if I want to call it an epiphany, because I really wish it was like, I woke up one morning and I said I wanted to go work for ESPN, but that was not the case. I actually, when I came home, I got my real estate license. So it was a little bit of a roundabout route to ESPN, but I feel very fortunate that I've landed where I have.
Yeah, no, and I noticed that one thing you did, though, and this seemed just kind of overflow, because I went back and read some of your blogs. You created a blog, thoughts from the field, and you started writing, and it wasn't just NFL. You just tucked in, and you showcased your gift and your skill, and just you're putting yourself to I don't know if it was yourself making you like, I want to do this or whatever it was, but it's just cool to see how you use that and how that kind of drove you. Can you kind of maybe share if there's people who are maybe struggling or trying to get in, or like myself, I've been a teacher for 20 years and I didn't expect to do this. This wasn't in my plans for life. I was going to be a teacher, and now I'm getting to talk to you. So for people who are kind of working and struggling, how did that process go, and how did it lead to where you are now?
First of all, teachers are the real MVPs. Appreciate all teachers out there. So thankful for all the work that you guys do. Yeah,
I'm the same story. Yeah, 18 years. This is my moonlight job. But it's such a good thing. You teach a day, and then you come home and you write fantasy and you talk fantasy sports. It's literally the best of both worlds.
The best commissioner that I have in any league that I play in is an administrator at a school, and he's been a longtime teacher too, and he's always been the best about it because he's able to compartmentalize better than the rest of us. We used to handling 16 to 17-year-old kids all day, that coming home and writing a league recap email is the easy part. So what I would say is that, so I learned a lot of this on the fly, but earlier you made a good point, Scott, that I think is important, is that I learned early like 2 things that I thought were sort of like important coaching points. Is that it takes a long time, and there's not like a certain time when you maybe necessarily know when you've reached this point, but it's important to find your voice. And what I mean by that is there are so many people doing fantasy football coverage, which is amazing. It's great. But how are you different? You don't have to be different for the sake of being different, but like, what's going to compel me to want to read Scott or Jamie or listen to Scott or Jamie on their podcast versus, Pete Overzet or Matthew Berry or anybody else, right? And find your voice, but it's got to be truly and authentically you. And I've always felt like the best way that you can sort of find your voice and then develop it is, this is going to sound a little bit unique, but you don't have to say everything that you believe, but you have to believe everything that you say. And what I mean by that is, like, my opinions on every single topic are not of interest to everybody, right? I don't think people care about my thoughts on the NBA play-in game that much, for example, but they would like to know what I think about the wide receiver the Lions just drafted or something like that. So I kind of know which points are important for me to chime in on. And then the second part of that is believe everything that you say. If I go up there and I tell you, hey, you know what, man, I'm telling you, like, I don't care who, I don't care what your scoring system is. You absolutely need to take Saquon Barkley first overall in your draft this year if you have to pay. I'm not saying that's I'm not saying, hey, who knows? It could work out. I don't believe that, though, right? Like, what I believe is that if I had the first pick in the draft, I'd be targeting Christian McCaffrey, right? So I would say that if you believe everything you say,
Hmm.
and you say, but you don't have to say everything you believe, then I think that's a chance to find some success here. So, but I love what I love about the fantasy community. It reminds me of the beer community in this way, is that what I like about beer is I drinking a soaker from Holmes is not like saying that, hey, I don't have respect for the local brewery in Maryland or Maine, right? It's that I'm trying this tonight, and then tomorrow I'm gonna have a beer from Maine, and next time I have a beer from Connecticut, and then I'm next, like that's how it goes. We share the love. So fantasy is, I learn from people all the time. I'm constantly learning from somebody who makes me smarter, and you name the analyst, and I'm learning from those people. So that part is cool to me.
No, I think that's great. And I think what you touched on earlier, too, is a point about the discourse, is that all of this, whether you disagree with Matthew Berry or Jamie and I disagree, we approach a player differently or a strategy differently, whatever it is, the opportunity presents itself to be able to communicate and to hear from others and to learn from others. And I think that's a thing that as a teacher, Jamie and I both have just kind of, you have to do that as an educator because you're learning from your students. You go into the process of going, I have information, but I need to know what they know and how they know it and how to get it to them. So you're not just shoving information at people, you're receiving tons of information and feedback so you can then give out the best way to get people to kind of perceive what you want them to understand. And you do that as an analyst all the time when you unpack a player and you kind of let us know. So I think that's great. One thing I want to share right now is a cool thing I came across. This is, you do lots of cool things for ESPN. So I'm not trying to, say there's only one cool thing you've done, but this is one cool thing that you did. And we can't watch it because it's on YouTube, and I'm not going to watch it because I'm not going to get us kicked off of YouTube. I've heard enough of the Joe Rogan stuff saying, hey, we're on YouTube or whatever it is. So I don't want to get kicked off, but you made this video last year before the season started, and it was kind of 8 rules or 8 ways to make sure you have a fantasy season that when you're winning, not that you're going to win it all or anything, but that you're trending towards winning, which is in this big game of analytics, you need to kind of move towards winning, and you want to present yourself, like you said, with your boss. He went 0-4, but then he put himself in a position during the playoffs to make do and to win out. And so I thought that was a really cool just set of directives. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of not pick apart, but we're going to talk about how they apply now in the new season. 2021 is not the same as 2020. That's a thing that DFS kind of mind that I have. Every week's different. Every slate's different. Every play is different, really. It's a play-to-play league. So there's some key tenets that you put out that I think are great. And I'm going to kind of just touch on them real quick. And you guys can see, I'm showing my show sheet. Awesome. Yeah. This is the show sheet, guys. If you guys want to really see, I'm going to unshare my show sheet real quick. But what are you going to do? I'm still learning how to produce. So the first one, though, is focus on value. Not all fantasy positions are created equal. And so my question is around that. I love that idea. Traditionally RB scarcity, drives up the value of RBs in the first couple rounds. How do you see that applying to this season? Is that kind of holding true? Is that trending in the same direction? And then are there some running backs that you kind of just have to have in that section of the first 2 rounds?
Yeah. So by the way, just like on background for people that maybe haven't seen the piece or haven't read it before, is I do this actually every year, and I do it. The simple sort of concept here is that we all, you guys could do 75 drafts and you won't need my help at all. Like, you just don't, you guys are smart enough to know what to do. But, and a lot of people that are listening to fantasy podcasts don't need this advice, right? They know how to draft. But what we do have is a lot of people that are doing it for the first time, and it's kind of scary, right? Like, you're at an office and all your office mates are talking about the draft they plan, and you're like, I'm going to be a part of this, but I have no idea how to do this, right? So the rules have been written, and I modify them a little bit, but not a ton each year. And the idea is, as you mentioned, so again, the first thing is that, like, if my, I don't know, somebody I've never met before or somebody I've never played before, is doing this for the first time, they may go to the draft and look at the players that score the most points and say, okay, great, Patrick Mahomes, highest scoring player on my team, I should take him first. Not knowing, that there are 25 quarterbacks that will score, 250 points or more this year, but there might be 8 running backs. So focus on value early. think about running backs, and there are every year we end up gravitating towards like 3 or 4 that merit top overall pick consideration. I think probably this year they'll end up being about 4 guys that have a case as 1.01 in your drafts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that. And I think one thing that we have to understand is there's lots of competing ideas and theories out there. 0 RB, 0 wide receiver, robust RB, whatever it is. Knowing your league and understanding how your league, how many flex spots you have, how many RBs you start each week, all of those things I think go into that. And particularly, in a lot of these leagues where after the first, I did some research on this because I wanted to actually go back and look at the validity of all of this because I'm a numbers guy, nimble with numbers. I mean, that's my forte. I got to speak from the data, and Field's right. After that first 20, receiver for running back, the first top 20, they're not equally the same, but there's similar ranges that they fall into, and that 20 to 40 range, your wide receivers are outscoring your running backs. By
totally, yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just to add on to what you said too about like the first timers, how overwhelming it can be. Like even the first time just doing a new scoring system, like tight end premium, where it's a 1.5 per tight end reception, it just changes the whole dynamic of it. And even we had one of our subscribers DMing me the other day, and he's asking me, it's his first dynasty startup. And he's asking me questions about it, like, should I draft this guy over this guy? This guy seems like a good one to take. Why is he still there? And he showed me his breakdown, and it's 1 running back, 1 receiver, and 5 flex spots, and that changes everything. Like that's a new way of drafting. So I mean, it's so helpful to have that kind of yearly thing that you put out because it just covers every basic thing just to have there. So I really enjoy that.
More people playing fantasy is good for fantasy. So if we can get more people in or on the boat, then we're in business. And the way that you get people in is by encouraging them and not scaring them. And, I play in leagues with coworkers, high school classmates, college classmates, family members, strangers, you name it, and softball league teammates, things like that. That's what you want. So I get it. 98% of the people that I most engage with don't need to know that, don't draft a kicker in the last round. But the 2% that don't know when to take a kicker, we want to make them smarter because, I love fantasy no matter what, but I think it's more enjoyable when the league is competitive with engaged managers.
Yeah. That's it. No. Right there. Yep.
No, sorry, Jamie, didn't mean to cut you off. I agree. And I think that the community is what's important behind these leagues. You mentioned softball leagues, friends, family, even strangers. Fantasy, to me, it's a community that brings people together, and it's I love it. It's brought me so much support and love and care going through my own situation and stuff. And I really do look at the people who are involved in it as some of the best people out there. And you'll hear like, oh, Twitter's a terrible place, don't go on Twitter. Man, fantasy football Twitter can be an incredible place. There's so many positive people like yourself, Field, who when they look at other people, they see an opportunity to collaborate, to work together, to lift up. And that's what I love about it. Between the 3 of us in the DMs, I'm just telling everybody, like, man, Field's even nicer than he appears, which is hard to do, but I love that part of it because beating somebody, it does feel good, but really at the end of the day, it's not like you're going to make $5,000 or $10 million, whatever it is, winning that home league, but you do have that sense of this is fun, this is competitive. It really brings an element of just life. Really, that's what life is all about, is enjoying each of these things. And so, no, I think that's great. Go ahead.
We were talking about that today. I mean, just with some of our buddies in the community, Jeff Bell on there, he said he saw someone say it's oversaturated, and I just couldn't, someone said that on Twitter. I just couldn't disagree more. I mean, I think if anything, it's undersaturated. The more people that come into this community and produce content, whether you agree with it or not, what they're coming out with is really what is important here. Developing that community, making room for everybody in this space. So, I mean, I applaud you for doing that, and I'm glad that that we're really thinking the same way with that, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I think a sign of a good thing, by the way, and this is a dog analogy I make sometimes, is that my dog basically does the exact same thing all day, every day, and he's happy every single day. He wakes up, he eats, we go on a walk, or he goes in the bathroom. He come back, takes naps, he plays with toys, he bothers my wife and I, and that's all he does throughout the day. Like the same 5 things. And he's
God, I
happy
wish
as a
that was
clam.
my life.
Fantasy football, it may not change that much. You draft, you use the waiver wire. Some leagues I've been playing in for 12, 15 years. You've got 1 running back. You've got 2 running back. I'm sorry, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, 1 defense, 1 kicker. The rules are the same. It's just shuffling the parts. And that's a sign of a good thing. We keep it simple, baby. And that's what makes fantasy football so, so fun to me.
No, I love that. And one thing you touched on earlier about the Patrick Mahomes scoring the most points, whoever the quarterback is. So last year, Josh Allen rocketing up, scoring the most points. We don't turn around and draft him. One of your points is don't take a quarterback too soon. Be patient at quarterback. And so who are some of these quarterbacks this year who you're waiting on and who you're not scooping up the first 5 or 6 or the handful of those guys who get every year? I mean, I'm in a bunch of leagues where there's always some guy who thinks he's funny and he goes, yeah, Patrick Mahomes, 3rd pick in the draft, or Lamar Jackson, 7th pick in the draft, and you're just like, what are you doing, man? And so who are some of the later round guys that you're looking at this year who have value?
Yeah, I think there are a few, and I don't know that they're guys that I'm necessarily targeting, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they wound up playing well. Matt Ryan will be a reasonable fantasy quarterback this year. Sam Darnold will be a reasonable fantasy quarterback this year. I think Cam Newton, if he remains a starter, could be a reasonable fantasy quarterback this year. Baker Mayfield could be a reasonable fantasy quarterback this year. I don't think any of those guys are going to be premier targets in your draft, because they either, just because of other quarterbacks that are going to move further up the board, or you've got guys like Trevor Lawrence that are kind of the shiny new objects people are excited about. So those are examples of players that I'm not counting on them being stars, and all of them could fail. But what's the cost going to be? I mean, you might not even draft some of those players. At best, it might be, 13th round picks. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee that Sam Darnold finds his way, but he's 23. And I don't, we in fantasy don't have to worry about how much money he's making. I just know that he's got Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore as his top 2 targets, with David Moore and Christian McCaffrey and, some of the pieces they have in place along that Carolina offense. And to me, looks pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also along those lines too, like, the other questionable position that if you either go up for or you wait on is the tight end. If you don't get those Kelsey and Wallers and Kittles and even Pitts, the way he's been going these days. So if you're assigning value to later round tight ends, what is it you're looking for there? Are you looking for touchdown upside, targets, the offense in general? Where do you go if you kind of miss out on that top tier?
Probably 2 things that are tied together: touchdown upside and athletic ability. Like, I just don't want to draft a stiff tight end, a guy who I'm just like, what's best case scenario? Like, I don't want to be unkind to a player, but like Darren Fells scoring all these touchdowns over the past few years is like such an outlier to me. I don't get it, right? Like, he's like 6'6" or 6'7". He's huge, but he's like not supremely athletic, right? Like, I'd rather just bet on a guy who has some upside. Like, one of these years, Chris Herndon's going to prove me right. He's been playing on garbage offenses, but like, if you saw Chris Herndon just running around and like, not wearing pads, but doing passing drills, you'd be like, Chris Herndon's a really athletic guy. So they're going to be players that check that box for me this year, right? Whether it's Irv Smith or, as an example, the Vikings presumptive starting tight end this year. I try to make it happen with Ian Thomas in Carolina because, as much as it's great to have a Kelsey or a Kittle or a Waller, like, if I miss on one of those guys, if Irv Smith doesn't pan out or what have you, like, I'll end up finding somebody on the waiver wire who's not great, but it's like, he's not one of the top 5 tight ends, but he has just as good of a chance as anybody else of, being the 12th best scoring tight end in a given week.
Yeah, I mean, think of Logan Thomas last year.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, not somebody on the radar to begin with. He was a late round tight end kind of target. And I like what Jamie was thinking. Is it offensive scheme? And I think there is like a marrying of all of those together. And so Irv Smith, I do think, fits that mold where you have a defense that has struggled at times. They've engaged in a back and forth contests. They're in a division that has Aaron Rodgers and it had Matt Stafford in it. So there's shootouts where being in these divisional games, which happen twice a year, which was great for fantasy football. And so Irv Smith last year, I think he had 3 touchdowns in one game. And that doesn't mean he's going to do it every time, but he has the athleticism. He has that quickness over the linebackers. He can get behind them, and then in between the safeties, he can do the jump ball. So I love what you're saying about Irv Smith. He's somebody who in best ball, I've been kind of sneakily, getting him across the board. And so, no, I think that's great. One thing you touched on too in your piece is that defenses do not win you championships. And I love that juxtaposition against the kind of the narrative in society of football that like you got to have a defense. But the defense from one year to the next doesn't always translate. And we're going to see a shift in the sands every year because of massive turnover because of free agency. So when you think about that defense, it doesn't win championships. Are you streaming the whole season? Are you okay with that? Are you comfortable with streaming? For new fans, what streaming means is that you don't hold on to the same defense the whole year. You're able to drop it, let it go, never see it again, which is tricky. So do you stream, or are you going to hold on to maybe 1 or 2 defenses? How do you do that?
Yeah, if I land a reasonable one early in the season, I just stick with that defense until the bye week. And like, it's one thing if it's the Bears a few years ago or the Patriots 2 years ago. It really wasn't a defense last year, if I can recall, that like totally changed the dynamics of your league. The Steelers were really good defensively for much of the season, but more often than not, you have defenses who are like just sort of solid, right? Like, if they average double-digit points for a season, I'm happy with it. I'm thrilled with it. But I'm not counting on much. Really, what I try to do is just avoid defenses that are playing the Chiefs or the Bucs in a given week. That's about it.
Yeah.
I don't know who was, and this might be like a failure of my job, but like, do you guys recall who the highest scoring defense was last year? I mean, I don't offhand. Washington, maybe?
It doesn't ring a bell. I know the Rams were quite strong at times.
Yeah, I remember the Rams.
But
yeah.
Washington won me money in DFS. So from week to week, they were.
I live in DFS myself, so.
I agree with you, Field, and I think that and you said it even in this video, which is cool, is that there's always some 8th round guy in your league who jumps up and he gets the top defense from last year. And it's a huge wasted pick because it never is the same defense from year to year. So, I think that is a real great way to think about it, is that unless you land that best defense at the 85 Bears that are never going to be stopped, then you have to be flexible.
You have to get super fortunate, and, most likely fantasy football at its core is basically increasing upside and minimizing risk. And sometimes those work together and sometimes those don't work together, right? Sometimes you play it safe and sometimes you swing for the fences. But defense, we have this massive sample size of 20, 30 years where it's obvious that like it's the most unpredictable part of fantasy football. So I don't one thing I love about fantasy is that like it's your team, like not my team, it's your team. So you can approach it as you choose. But when I'm playing in a league and I see people that are doing or sort of violating the spirit of a couple of these rules, I think of it as, from an approach standpoint, I feel comfortable that my team will be as solid, if not better, than some of the opposing teams.
And you mentioned that's okay. And you mentioned swinging for the fences too. So when you've got your team set there and you're quote swinging for the fences with those kind of high upside late round breakouts, maybe at the end of your draft.
Sure.
Who are some you're targeting this year? Be it rookies or second year, third year players that you think are getting out of there. Maybe someone in a new offense. Who are you targeting there? If you got a couple of those type players for us.
All right. So I don't know. I always have to kind of like measure my audience a little bit, because it's like, I can name somebody like, Tyrell Williams, like someone's got to catch passes in Detroit. People might be like, dude, I've I've already drafted Tyrell in like a few different leagues or something, right? But there are a couple of offenses that I believe in that I think there's some opportunity. I think the Titans offense is going to have to find a second pass catcher. So Josh Reynolds kind of intrigues me, the former Ram who got signed to a one-year deal, because Tannehill is really good, and right now they don't have anybody other than A.J. Brown that you trust. The Chargers have a very good offense as well. Mike Williams is a talented, high pedigree guy, but he's really struggled with injuries and has struggled to stay on the field and be consistent. So is there, whether it's Josh Palmer, their third-round pick out of Tennessee, or somebody else, is there a Chargers wide receiver who emerges that could be, the guy this year? And then it's like, you either look for a guy who maybe is like the top receiver in a less favorable offense. Like, is Nelson Aguilar being slept on based off how he played last year? Like, I don't see anybody talking about him as like a top 30 wide receiver, right? And maybe the answer is he's not one. But that being said, like, this guy got a lot of money and he played really well last year. And who knows who the Patriots quarterback will be. But those are examples of guys that I think have a chance to, cost you nothing and help you a lot.
Right. That's the key there. I mean, you're not paying a high price for Aguilar. So, what's the risk there?
Totally.
Yeah.
Basically none. Yeah.
None. No. And same with Josh Reynolds. That's a nice sneaky way. And I think we think about, unfortunately, if we took the names away from all of these numbers, we would think about fantasy football differently. But we attach we attach value to names because they're highlights, because they're skilled athletes. So there's a whole milieu or a whole body of thought process that connects to people. And so if you think about people who are blow up guys, I think of, I don't know, was it Josh Lloyd or somebody from a couple years ago? My brain is going out of commission here, but there was somebody who he sucked with the Washington football team, and then he went to San Francisco and he was ridiculous and he blew up, and he was one of like the darlings of the fantasy the year. I don't know who it is. My mind is gone, but there's people who you write them off because they're not in your mind what you think they should be. And that's a real small way of thinking about this. We really have to think bigger. Oh, is it Lloyd? Is that his name?
Brandon Lloyd.
Brandon Lloyd? Yeah, Lloyd could be.
Yeah, I mean, he was trashed in the media. He was, at least here in Washington, he was ridiculed. He couldn't even get on the field. And so if you went from that thought process of everyone kind of thinking the same to discounting him, he had volume, he had opportunity, and that really is going to drive it. And so when you look at the Titans, long point to get to it, but we get to the Titans, it's the same thing you're looking at, is the opportunity. Last year, there was a huge opportunity for anybody who lined up next to A.J. Brown on that side. So I love it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So, Field, I've been waiting to ask you this question all week since we were leading up to this podcast. So I published a piece this week, a short one, simply about Aaron Rodgers and the potential fantasy fallout if he were to leave Green Bay. So, this is a tricky thing right now to me if we're drafting, which many of us are. And basically, the whole piece kind of centered around, like, what do we do with Javonte Adams? What do we do with Aaron Jones? Do we guess where Aaron Rodgers is going to land? Do we upgrade the Denver wide receivers because beat writers or the betting lines are favoring him there? So where are you standing on that? Like, how much do you downgrade Davante Adams? I mean, I think is the biggest pressing question. And then maybe some of the other Green Bay offensive pieces.
I use it as a tiebreaker. So I don't think Davante is going to fall any lower than like wide receiver 5 in any draft, because he's Davante Adams. And while you can't guarantee what will happen with Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love or anything else, we can look back to 2018. There were a few years ago when Aaron Rodgers missed some time.
Yeah, and Brett Hundley.
Yep, Brett Hundley played like half the season, and Davante Adams still had 10 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. So, and was a Pro Bowler.
Yeah, and if there's ever been a wide receiver who has shown that, hey, something, I'm not quarterback proof, but I'm really good no matter who you haven't thrown the football to me, it's Davante Adams. So I can't really downgrade him that much at all. And I think on the Denver stuff is I got to just leave it be. Like, I can't, I love Cortland Sutton. I love Jerry Jeudy. I love Tim Patrick. I can't talk myself into upgrading these guys just based upon something that hasn't even happened yet and is no guarantee to happen.
Yeah. I do like,
but it's enticing too, right? It's really crazy to think about, like, you get Cortland Sutton in the 6th round, and next thing you know, you got Aaron Rodgers. It's like, oh my God, might have a top 5 wide receiver.
yeah, it's interesting how one shift can kind of reset the fantasy landscape in so many different directions. I mean, Jerry Jeudy would jump 2 rounds immediately. I mean, it would just be a
absolutely.
nightmare. Well, I love that. Speaking of kind of a fantasy, not juggernaut, but somebody who's been one, is Julio Jones. We've heard trade talks. There's been back and forth. A bunch of different teams are approaching Atlanta saying, hey, we want Julio with the Pitts draft pick. And maybe he kind of feels underappreciated and not part of their future. Where do we see Julio landing, and kind of what does that mean for Kyle Pitts? Not that you have to nail where Julio lands, but what are we looking at? Fantasy scenario, what would we kind of like to see? Maybe wishful thinking, and then how's that Kyle Pitts, man? This is a game changer for him too.
Yeah, I would think Julio would be a lot of fun in Tennessee. Obviously they have that number 2 wide receiver job that we're looking for, and I think you can make a case that Julio would be the number 1 wide receiver in Tennessee, even with AJ Brown. But that's a really interesting one to me. The Falcons probably would like to trade away Julio from the division, from the conference. And by the way, of course, their new head coach, Arthur Smith, comes from Tennessee. So there's plenty of familiarity there. And in terms of Kyle Pitts, I think that because of the lack of tight end star power that we were talking about earlier, you can probably still draft the upside of Kyle Pitts somewhere between like the 4th and 7th best tight end in your fantasy in your league. If Julio's gone, it probably increases the chances that Pitts reaches that 4 or 5 range. But even without Julio, like even if Julio got traded right now, I don't think I'm moving Kyle Pitts ahead of Waller, Kittle, or Kelsey. So I think it just maybe increases the odds of him being tight end 4 or 5 as opposed to tight end 8 or 9.
Yeah, no,
I agree.
No, that's good. I just want to make sure that the Kyle Pitts, his range of outcomes, I have him as my tight end 3 right now. So I have him right ahead of Kittle, but it's barely ahead of Kittle. Sure. And the only reason I have that in there is if you tell me Kittle is healthy all season, he's ahead of that. But he's so physical, and he lays his body on the line every play, and he'd rather hit you being a pending linebacker on a goal line play than catch a touchdown. He'd rather put it on you. So, but I like that in that range. It kind of gives me more faith in him. I was preaching him from the beginning. I said, please Atlanta, please Atlanta, please Atlanta. But I didn't think they would trade away Julio. I thought it would be more of a triple-headed threat, and it would just be so dynamic. But now that Julio's kind of gone, I was a little worried. So that was a personal question for me. So, Field, I appreciate it. They say don't mix business with pleasure, but I had to put a little bit of what I wanted to know into the show sheet. I cheated just a little bit. So sorry. Thank you.
Well, I can say too that, I'm a Giants fan, and they played Denver week 1. So, Rodgers to Denver is guaranteed now, because this is my luck.
I won't print the jersey yet, but I'll think about it.
Okay. So, before we get to maybe our last section here, we have to ask, while we have you here, the elephant in the room, what are we doing with Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I honestly don't have a good answer there. I'm just going to sort of read the tea leaves. Is the Texans signed Tyrod Taylor? They drafted Davis Mills. They have to be prepared for the possibility of Deshaun Watson not being there week 1. This is a football story, but it's much more than a football story, obviously.
Yeah.
Side of it is off the football field. So there's a little bit of a sort of an interesting line that we're trying to figure out how to talk about Deshaun Watson in fantasy football. I think for right now, I would just fade Deshaun Watson entirely.
I have been too. Yeah. I've told people that, if he plays, he's the steal of your dynasty startups in the rounds he's going in at his ADP, but it's getting uglier all the time. And like you said, it's bigger than football too. So it's a tough one.
Well, and as a girl dad and a brother to 3 sisters and a mom and grandmas and stuff, not that you can't draft Deshaun Watson, and I'm not going to chastise anybody who does, but in the big picture, it's not that the main focus for him. I think it should be figuring this thing out and
I would agree. Yep.
making sure that everybody who's involved gets heard and cared about and loved. Because this is what's actually most important in society, is that every single human is humanized and treated equally, and treated, or not equally, but equitably, in a way that it sustains them and says that you're valued. And so I care about that. So once that gets sorted, then we can jump into football, honestly.
Yeah.
But I'm going to fade him too. And it's not because I think he's a bad person or any of those things, or he's guilty or anything, but I think that there's bigger picture. And I like that, from everybody, and particularly given why we're here, Jamie, and bigger picture of what's kind of going on in society. I think that the way that we treat women and the way that the society and fantasy football and all of us treat women, it has to change. It has to meet the expectations of how we would want to be treated. And that's as humans. It's the same exact way that as a man, a woman should be treated. And doesn't mean there's not, acknowledging the differences, but it's a society that is tilted towards men. And so men need to be aware of that. We use our power to love and support and sustain and encourage women. I love women. They're the best. And my wife is going to hear this podcast. I'm going to share it with her. And my daughters are going to hear it because I love them and they're awesome. And they should all hear it. And women should be able to hear what we talk about when we're on podcast and when we're doing whatever we're doing. We should all be inclusive. So that's my spiel. Sorry, it's not on the show sheet. But as a girl dad, I love ladies and I love my mom and all those people. So, all right. So let's jump in real quick. We do need to get to the rookie. So we'll go kind of rapid fire. We've kept you here way too long. I'm sure your wife and, Cisco's probably like clawing through the door. So let's talk rookies. And what I want to do is from a fantasy perspective, it's either or. Who do you have? And kind of give a little a reason kind of why you're leaning. And we'll all go through it. I'll start with Field. We'll go Field, Jamie, and then myself. Trevor Lawrence or Trey Lance this year. And if you don't like either, you can throw Justin Fields in there or Mac Jones or anybody else you want. So we'll start with you, Field. Trevor Lawrence or Trey Lance?
Trevor Lawrence, because I know he's going to start.
I love that. So guaranteed the production, it's going to come because he's going to be there 100%. Jamie, how about you?
I'm going to say Lawrence too, but I'm going to throw the caveat in there that the San Francisco playoff schedule is as soft as anything I've seen. So it's possible that Lance is the one that wins you your league, but I'm still drafting Lawrence first.
I like that. So maybe get Lawrence on the beginning and then end it with Lance. So a little combo. That's great. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with, and I'm going to say Trevor Lawrence on this one as well. I just think when you throw into LaVisca and then, you've got two, James Robinson, I know that he's like the dynasty, Cole. Now he was the diamond last year. Now he's Cole like a couple weeks ago. But, Travis Etienne, all of those people are going to feed into Trevor Lawrence. So he's going to be dumping the ball off, throwing the ball. So I think there's a great opportunity for Trevor Lawrence. I know that he's one of my my co-conspirator Bowman Big Times. He's like his QB1 for fantasy rookie. So I love that. All right. So now it's Javonte Williams versus Travis Etienne. I'm going to start here. I'm going to say that Javonte Williams by the end of the season takes over the RB1 role in Denver, and he is going to outscore Travis Etienne. That's what I think. I'm going that way. Field, how about you?
I'm going to go with Etienne. I think he has more passing game upside. That's my reason for leaning that way.
I love it. PPR focus. Jamie, ending with you, sir.
I'm also going to go with Javonte Williams, but that's a tough one. I'm basically what I'm looking for is the threat of the other running back, and I think James Robinson is a bigger one than Melvin Gordon.
Fair.
Or split here. Controversy. Okay. Last one. We're not even going to touch on tight ends because we think Kyle Pitts is going to be the tight end one. So we're going to go wide receiver, and you get three choices. And Jamie, I'm going to start with you. We've got Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, or Devonta Smith. Who's going to be the wide receiver one from the rookies?
Oh my God.
This is the question that breaks you out of all of them.
I know. You're also going to make me pick an Eagle. I actually think it's going to be Devonta Smith. I think he steps into the wide receiver one-ish role faster than the other ones. His route running is something that I think is going to help a quarterback like Hurts more. I think long-term upside is Chase, but I think the immediate one I want out of those three, especially at a lower ADP than the other two, I think is Smith.
Okay. All right. Field, how about you, sir?
I'm going to go with Jamar Chase. The Bengals, we know, are going to be relying upon three wide receivers, and I do think he is the most talented of the three, which is saying something because you had three guys drafted in the top 10 at the same position.
Yeah, wow.
And the fact that they took him over Sewell, too, says something about how important he is to them, I guess, too, yeah.
And you know what?
Absolutely.
I'm not going to. I remember a couple years ago when we thought about the college game. I remember Chip Kelly came in, and the big question always is kind of, does the college game equate to the NFL game? Does it work? It's a big kind of trope. The real question is, though, now is how can the NFL adapt fast enough to these college players who have built relationships with each other, who have, I mean, we talked about it on my Fantasy Millionaire show on Monday. There are like 4 or 5 connections, even in the first round, from, Burrow and Jamar Chase to Waddle and Tua to Smith and Hurts. Everybody is kind of, Lawrence and Etienne. They're putting together the band that they were part of before because they were so successful and they have that background knowledge. So I like them all. I'm going to be different and just say Jalen Waddle because
Okay.
I don't think that Javonte Parker is anything anymore in that offense necessarily. And Will Fuller has not shown that, he when he's not on I'm allegedly, I guess I can say, on the roids or whatever it is that he was busted for, can be completely healthy. So, I mean, I actually think it's going to be Smith, but I'm going to go Waddle just to be a little bit different in this. So, I love it. So I think that kind of wraps up our show today with a rookie talk. I appreciate you coming on, Field. This has been outstanding. I'm so grateful for it. If you told me a couple years ago as a fan of ESPN, as a fan of fantasy football, that'd be getting to interview Field Yates and talk to him on my show, I would say you're crazy. Like it's crazy. So I appreciate you and just getting to be able to meet you. It's been awesome.
It's been great. We really appreciate coming on with us. Thank you so much.
Of course, guys. Yeah, absolutely. It's been my honor.
No, and you know what? The authenticity that you bring, I think, is one of the things that has made you so successful, and that's one of the things that everybody needs to bring to the space. So, like Jamie said before, if you're into Twitter, if you're into fantasy football, wherever the avenue is that you're there, be 100% yourself and pour what you have into it. I think Field is a very great example of that. We all are an example of that, and be yourself and share what you have. We love you all. Field, where can people find you? I mean, I'm going to show where people can find you, but where can people find you and your work, and what do you kind of have coming up next?
I always tell people the easiest way to find me is I funnel all my information to Twitter at Field Yates, and I'll be hosting NFL Live tomorrow. So if you find yourself watching TV around 4 p.m. Eastern time, you can see me and the great cast flapping our gums for an hour talking about the latest on whatever is buzzing around the NFL.
No, I love it. And this is his Twitter page. And you know what? I'm honored that you follow me. It's amazing. And I'm grateful for it. And I think all of us in the fantasy community really never lose sight of the love that we have for fantasy football. And that's the cool thing that we all share, is that you're waking up like thinking, looking at your phone going, Aaron Rodgers got traded to the Broncos. Oh my goodness. Like, we're all thinking about that same excitement that we all bring. And so we're all part of that fraternity, the love for football and fantasy football in particular. So I'm so glad that you chose the path that you chose, and that Emily, decided to hire you and say that, you should be a scout. I would say she made a great choice, and I'm so excited for that. And I'm grateful for her and for everybody else who's kind of led us all on this journey. My wife is going to be very pleased that I did not drink too many beers during the show, and I kind of comported myself, and she'll say, how did it go? And I said, it went great. I'll tell Field will say it went great, I'm sure. So, thank you guys, and do go follow Field Yates and check out what he is doing over at ESPN, the podcasts, the NFL Insider. This is the guy to know, and tell Matthew Berry that we love him as well. He's welcome to come on. But this is a Field Yates podcast. Like you've won us over.
I'm in.
Yeah. Yes. And, you're awesome, and everybody else is awesome over there. And please do sign up for Fan Team Advice. There's a bunch of stuff brewing for Fan Team Advice. If you want to win in any sport, DFS, they're so DFS focused. NimbleWnumbers.com is DFS focused too. Check me out over on Twitter at NimbleWnumbers. Check Jamie out at JAC3600. And then, Field Yates is just at Field Yates on Twitter. You check him out there. I'm over at Underdog Fantasy. If you sign up for Underdog, please use code NIMBLE. That's going to help me build my daughters their extra home that they want me to build. That's one thing about ladies. I love them. They have big dreams, and that's cool about ladies. They want big things.
Big expensive dreams.
They do. And so I started my podcast, The Fantasy Football Millionaires, inspired by my daughter, who said to me, Dad, I need you to move all of your stuff out of the shed so that you can buy me a car or a driving, contraption so I can park it in there. And I said, honey, I'm going to need a lot more. I need space for my lawnmower, the bikes, whatever it is, real small. We live in a townhome, we're not breaking Benjamins over here. So she goes, okay, what do you need for that to happen? I said, well, I need to be able to work right now and become a fantasy millionaire. She goes, well, then do it, because I want a she shed. And I said, what's a she? So, girls are amazing. They're making me work super hard. So please do follow me, follow Field, follow Jamie, check us all out. We love you. Thank you, Jamie, for doing this with me. I'm glad I have a great new partner. And Field, thank you for being our first new guest. You're amazing.
Yes, thank you, Field.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I appreciate it very much, and have a wonderful rest of your week, and less than 4 months till the football season begins.
Oh, who's counting?
The schedule dropped the other day. It was just, it's just
so good.
Yeah, thank you guys. We'll see you guys next week. I think next week we have Matt Waldman, which is incredible.
We do.
Matt Waldman.
Footballguys.com, yes.
It's going to be a Tuesday episode because of just scheduling situations. We're going to do it on Tuesday instead of Thursday. And then we're going to follow that up with Mr. Denny Carter himself. I love Denny. He lives in Maryland. I'm going golfing with Denny on Monday. So it's going to be great. I can't wait. Thank you, Field. Thank you, ESPN. Thank you, everybody. We love you. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.